Hello everyone, here's Paul from rmpforex.com and welcome to the weekly review of 5 major forex pairs based on Masterforex-V technical analysis. As every weekend, I will take a look at EURUSD, British pound, Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, and Japanese yen against US dollar. For those of you who is watching my reviews for the first time, I will explain you very quickly. Each weekend I choose my strategic direction based on H4 and D1 time frame for each of those pairs, and then once I have that strategic direction, each morning I trade intraday. Each morning I create a tactical plan for that day, and once I have a tactical plan and entry zones, then I go and use my trend following trading system. So with you, I'm sharing 30% of my trading plan, and let's get straight into it. If you'll remember my last review, last weekend I mentioned this pivot point, and I said that as long as this pivot point is not broken, this pair will stay in a trend phase up. As you can see, trend created by this daily FZR up is still intact, and the same pivot point is still valid. As long as this pivot point is not broken, I will be looking for some new buy positions. But just to explain you what this reference point means for me, although I use this pivot point as a pivot point that gives me a strategic direction, but I trade intraday, so as you can see, that's the same pivot here, yeah, that protects that strategic direction. This pivot point finished that wave up here, so now H1 time frame is back to flat phase. For me, it means if we will go and break through this reference point, it means that we will have an FZR of H1 down, and I will have to wait just until this C wave down will finish. So because I trade intraday and use very short stops, my stop losses are between 10 and 15 pips, sometimes 20 pips. So I cannot just open a position here and wait that the trend of daily will proceed. So I have to find a place, or I have, based on Masterforex-V technical analysis, I'm looking where this wave would be finished, and once it is, then I can start use my trend following trading system and try to catch the end of this pullback. But again, all that did not happen yet. We are still in the flat phase of H1, and also from the other side, once we go and break through this reference point, then also I will start attacking this trend up a bit more aggressively. But as long as we're between those two reference points, I will be very careful with my entries for EURUSD. So that's the idea for this pair. Next pair is British pound against US dollar. British pound, if you will remember my last review, I mentioned this pivot point, and I said that as long as this pivot point is not broken, the trend of daily will proceed. And as you can see, we had the whole last week a trend up, and the pivot point is still in the same place, and as long as this pivot point is not broken, the daily time frame trend will proceed. But again, for me as a day trader, I'm looking at this pivot point, because once we will break through this pivot point, then this pair will go back in H1 or H4 flat phase, and for me it's a dangerous place to try and open my short stop loss, my trades with short stop losses. So as long as this pivot point is not broken, I'll be looking for some new buy positions. But once we'll break through this pivot point, this pair will come back to H1 flat phase, and I will have to stay away from this pair. We'll see what will happen. We'll see how the next week will go. That's the idea for British pound. Trend phase is intact, and this is the moment where you use your trend following trading systems and you apply that saying, trend is your friend. That's exactly the moment. So next pair is Australian dollar against US dollar. Again, if you will remember my last review, I mentioned these two reference points, and I said that as long as we're between those two reference points, daily time frame is in the flat phase. And also I'll just go to a smaller time frame. Also during last review, here it was recorded, I mentioned this pivot point, and I said that as long as this pivot point is not broken, trend phase up will proceed. And as you can see, we were going up for the whole last week. Now for me, this pivot point protects the whole cycle, the whole impulse up, but this pivot point protects this wave here. So this FZR created that trend here. So this pivot point protects that trend. Once we will break through this pivot point, the pair will come back to H1 flat phase, and then I will stop using my trend following trading system. But for now, this impulse up is still developing, and we will see how far it will go. It will be quite interesting because if we will go and break through this reference point here, then you will remember from a couple of months I mentioned this reference point. We will have then FZR of weekly time frame up, and that will mean that Australian dollar will move into a long-term trend phase up. That will be also interesting to become aggressive in this trend up and follow that trend. We'll see how it will go. The next pair is Canadian dollar against US dollar. And again, if you will remember my last review, I mentioned it already a couple of times. We are still in D1 flat phase, and as long as we're between those two reference points, the pair will stay in a flat phase, and I'll just have to stay away from this pair. Just go through a couple of my last reviews, couple of months if you wish, and then you will realize what is happening with Canadian dollar and what these two reference points mean. So let's go then to Japanese yen against US dollar. If you will remember my last review, I mentioned this pivot point here. I also said that we are in a H4 trend down, and also I said that it will be quite interesting if we will break through this reference point here. So that here is now we broke through and made a daily FZR down. Also we have here a H4 FZR down. So these are now two time frames that are looking down, and this is the pivot point that I mentioned, and I said that as long as we are not breaking through this reference point, I will be looking for some sell positions. So the last week was quite successful with Japanese yen for me. From this place, I opened a couple of positions and they were closed out with just a couple of pips, but then I also managed to open a couple of trades from here and close them here. Again, I'm trading intraday, and many of you could probably say you're very smart. You're smart enough to tell us what you're doing now when the movement is gone. But if you would like to know more how I trade, as I said in the very start of the video, I share with you only 30% of my trading plan. And if you would like to know more how I trade and like to learn how I use those tactical plans and how I use my trend follow trading system, so I invite you to join the RMP Forex training course. And I will personally bring you through all those reference points and teach you everything that I know myself, and make sure that you can apply it in your personal trading. So now, although this pivot point is still protecting the trend down, but for me as a day trader, this reference point is more important at the moment, because if we will go and break through this reference point, it will mean an FZR of H4 up, and that will mean for me stop of this trend down. So as long as we're not breaking through this reference point, I will be looking for some new sell positions. Each morning I will be creating some tactical plans and we'll try to jump in to that trend, and hopefully that trend will go far enough for me. As you can see here is that daily time frame, daily FZR, and if we will go and break through this reference point, we will have a weekly FZR down. So in this case I will have a lot of profit in this trend down. We'll see how it goes. Market always decides what market wants. All I have to do is just follow the market and trade the facts, see what is happening, and just go with the market. So guys, that's the idea for Japanese yen. If you have any questions or thoughts or ideas, feel free to post in the comment section below. I will be more than glad to answer your questions or have a chat with you in the comment section below. If you are still not subscribed to this channel, here is the button for you. Click to subscribe, and I will talk to you the next weekend. Good luck.